is take a look at some of the less popular ways up. A couple things right off the bat. You'll notice that this is called the hiking paths that are slightly less taken. The whites are a busy area. It is a highly visited recreation area, and we'll talk a little bit about those numbers later. So at the end of this, if you go out on one of these hikes and you see people, that you might, you know, these are well-graded trails. They're well-known trails, but they're going to be a few less people. The other thing that I wanted to point out is this picture right here is, I think, great. I used to lead staff trainings for another organization. And the thing about staff trainings to me is I always wanted them to be really difficult. I thought, you know, because I thought anyone can be an outdoor educator. Anyone can be an environmental educator if the sun is shining and, you know, you're walking up to square ledge. So I always wanted staff trainings to be just thunder and rain and terrible weather and tough trails. And this picture is from one that I co-led. And I love it because it's one of the trails that we'll be talking about. And you can see this woman who's on a staff training. Her tennis shoes, they are covered, caked in mud, and she still hasn't even actually walked into that muddy section yet. So she hasn't even gotten to the really challenging part of the trail. Tonight, what we're gonna focus on. Oh wait, it won't let me shift. There we go. Oh, too far. Tonight, what we're gonna focus on is we're gonna do a quick intro to the 4,000 footers. We're gonna look at so that's the first thing we'll do. We'll look at some options for avoiding some of those busier trails. And then we're gonna look at 4 different options. So 4 different alternative routes to some of the popular 4,000 footers in our area. So what makes a 4,000 footer a 4,000 footer? The idea behind this is when they initially came up with this list was to try and disperse some use. The Presidential Range, the Franconia Ridge Range was starting to get a bit impacted just from the sheer amount of people visiting. And so they came up with this list as a way to disperse people and see some other parts of the white. So in order to make the list, is that a peak must be at least 200 feet higher than the ridge that connects it to another peak. So because of this, there's a lot of other peaks in the area, such as Clay or Gio or the South Peak of Musalaki, that are not included on this list, even though they're above 4,000 feet. Just side note, so Clay, you might, if you are a New Hampshire state legislator, you might refer to that as Mount Reagan, although no one else refers to it that way, but it is, according to the state, called Mount Reagan. And Gio, we are referring to the one in New Hampshire and not the 12,000 foot mountain in the Eastern Sierras. So just that one is definitely a 4,000 footer. This picture right here is from a lovely spot called Lila's Ledge in Pinkham Notch, and that's looking up towards the Lionhead. And you have Tuckerman Ravine on the left, you have Raymond's Cataract on the right. And the reason I chose this one is you can kind of see that ridge line on the left right there. That's the ridge line that Boot Spur sits on. And Boot Spur, which is a lovely sub-peak of Mount Washington, is not considered its own mountain because it does not rise 200 feet from that ridge. That's an example right there. All right. So what are those 4,000 footers in New England? There are 67 of them. And I should, at this point, say that I have not hiked all 67 New England 4,000 footers. I have hiked 62 of them. And after some careful consideration, I probably won't ever get to 67 because the last 5, they're far away. I don't really want to know if I want to drive 4 hours to stand on a peak in the middle woods when I could drive 10 minutes and hike up Glen Boulder. So I'm at 62 right now. I should also mention, my guess is there's probably some people watching this right now that are on this Zoom meeting that have probably done all 67, who've probably hiked a bit more than me. So if I mess up, if I say the wrong thing, feel free to jump in and correct me. There are 48 in New Hampshire, 14 in Maine, and 5 in Vermont. And you'll notice there's an asterisk next to that 48 in New Hampshire because back in, I believe it was February of 2019, using LiDAR mapping, Mount Tecumseh, which is the lowest 4,000 footer in the White Mountains, actually turns out to be around 3,995 feet. However, as of earlier this week, which is the last time I checked, it is still included on the AMC's 4,000 footer list. It has not been removed. And as far as I know, there are not any plans to remove it off that list. The other thing that I wanted to show you on this map, if you look at this, you've got the main cluster of White Mountains right there. are the 4,000 footers right here in the White Mountains. And the thing about, so I'm not from the East Coast. And moving to New England, people talk about, oh, the New England 4,000 footers, the New England 4,000 footers, there's 67 of them, you gotta hike them all. And I think that for some reason, we tend to forget that if you look right on the left side here, there's Lake Champlain, and right on the other side of that, there's a whole lot more 4,000 foot mountains. So there's a picture of the Adirondacks, which have their own version of the 48 4,000 footers. And that is the 46ers. Although I believe in the Adirondacks, 4 of the 46 are not 4,000 feet, that there are only 42 above 4,000 feet. And then there are 2 down in the Catskills. I don't know if I can one of them down there. I haven't spent a ton of time in the Adirondacks. The time that I have been there, I've maybe done, I don't know, half a dozen hikes. Have been spectacular. And the reason I chose this picture in particular is this is from Cascade Mountain, 4,098 feet, and Porter Mountain, which is another 4,000 footers in the foreground there. And it's a beautiful hike. It's a fairly easy hike. It's maybe 2.5 miles, 2,000 feet of elevation gain, certainly doable. And it gives you this spectacular view. And I had never heard of this mountain, didn't know anything about it. And I was actually in Lake Placid with my family on vacation. And this was the trailhead that was just the closest to where I was staying. Drove 5 minutes down the road and got to the top of this thing and couldn't believe how beautiful it was. With a view of the Great Range in the background there with just those tremendous slides. So that's all we're gonna say about the 4,000 footers in New York, but they're quite beautiful. All right, so back to New England. We have Maine. We said there are 14 4,000 footers in Maine, and the tallest of which is Baxter Peak, Katahdin, 5,268 feet in Baxter State Park. Other ones of note, and all right, this is just my opinion, right? But other ones of note would be the Bigelow Range. I really think that those are beautiful mountains. That's this picture right here. It's West Bigelow and Avery Peak. You've got Flagstaff Lake, which is off in the background. It's a really, really pretty spot. This picture over here on the left, this is the Hunt Trail, which is also the Appalachian Trail. So this is the Tablelands heading up to the summit of Katahdin. And this is a great trail. This is a great trail too, because this is believed to be the original route that Thoreau took when he climbed Katahdin. So, that sort of link to history. Moving on to Vermont with its 5 4,000 footers. I feel like I can't not have this and say something at least somewhat controversial. And I'm not that into Vermont 4,000 footers. I'm not that into them. I'm sure that would anger a lot of people in Vermont. There are lovely mountains there. Mount Hunger outside of Stowe, not 4,000 feet, a great mountain. The 4,000 footers in Vermont though they're nice, but I don't think they quite measure up to New Hampshire or Maine. But Mount Mansfield's your tallest one at 4,393 feet. The second tallest, I believe, is Killington, and then Camel's Hump is the 3rd tallest, but is also the tallest mountain in Vermont that doesn't have any development on top. Mansfield and Killington both are associated with ski results. All right, so moving on. Now we have New Hampshire, and there's that list, all 48 of them. I'm not going to read them because you can read them yourselves. They're right there, and you can see Tecumseh's over here with only with that asterisk still, as it is now about 8 feet lower than what's shown on that list. And this list comes from the AMC's 4,000 footer club. The one thing I will point out about this picture, so actually this picture down here, that's a photo from the North Slide Trail going up North Tri-Pyramid, which is a really fun hike and a beautiful mountain. And the one on the right, this one over here, that's taken from the Webster Cliff Trail, and that's looking at Mount Willie, Field, and Tom. So kind of for most people's might know, that's Mount Willard right there. There's Mount Avalon, Tom, and then going on that way. And so there's a lot of, this is just one list that people get excited about in the White Mountains. There's a lot of different hiking lists that people are into. So you can hike the 4,000 footers in the summer. You can hike them in the winter. You can do the grid, which is hiking them every month of the year. People do the 100 highest. They do the New England 4,000 footers. And so there's a lot of lists people get excited about, but I would say that doing this list is kind of the classic one to do all 48. All right. I can't go too much farther without at least stopping for a moment and saying that due to the current conditions of the world, for the summer, it's best to, and this actually is a quote from Mountain Rescue Service, is to keep it local and keep it tame. So a lot of organizations that oversee trails in the White Mountains, such as the National Forest, the AMC, you know, or the search and rescue organizations, whether that's the PEMI, Androscoggin Valley, or Mountain Rescue Service, have really advising people to, this is not the summer to push yourself. This is not the summer to go big. This is the summer to hike within your, well within your limits. And that is, I believe, probably the responsible thing to do this summer. So just as we think about that moving forward, we're going to be talking about some really big hikes, but I don't necessarily know if this is the summer to go out and try and do some of those. Okay, so when we talk about how do we know that we are within our comfort, well, it's what is well within our comfort range. Part of that is being knowledgeable. So the hiker safety code comes from Fish and Game. It's a collaboration of Fish and Game and the National Forest, the White Mountain National Forest. And it's just making sure that you are knowledgeable about where you're going, that you leave your plans with someone else, talking about knowing when to turn back, what to do in emergencies, that sort of thing. I would encourage people to buy a hike safe card. You can buy those from Fish and Game. They help support all SAR rescues on the National Forest and statewide. So I would encourage people to do that. Other things to know would be the 10 essentials, making sure you have what you need in order to be safe. This list right here looks a little different than the classic 10 essentials. This list comes from the Mountaineers, which is a very reputable organization based out of Seattle. And they updated this list just so that people, you know, as times change, as technology changes, just so that people have what they need in order to be safe. All right, and then leave no trace, making sure that once you're out there, you're within your comfort zone, you know how to act responsibly and recreate responsibly in the backcountry. So you've got your 10 essentials. You left your plans with somebody else. You are knowledgeable at LNT. You took your wilderness first responder and you're ready to go. And so you are just ready to hit the high country. And look at that picture, right? So you're sitting there and you're at home and you're just dreaming of Franconia Ridge, and you got, there's a beautiful day, just a couple clouds, lots of blue up there. There's 2 other people on the ridge and you're just ready to, you know, the high country is snow free. You're ready to go hit it. You're so excited about that. And you jump in your car and you head there and you pull up to the trailhead. Oh, and this is what you see. Oh no, that's awful. Oh, so this is an actual photo of Interstate 93. For those of you that maybe be less familiar with the area, I-93 runs right through Franconia Notch. There's a major hub for hiking, and there's a lot of large trailheads there. And this picture, you know, there are on the left side and the right side of the picture, there are quite a few large parking areas for these trails, but these are cars that are lined up on the side of the interstate. This is a photograph from probably 2 or 3 years ago. It definitely would have predated the hiker shuttle. So about 2 or 3 years ago. And so this is a day where there easily could be 1,000 people on Franconia Ridge, 1,500 people on Franconia Ridge, easily. So how do you avoid that? How do you avoid those large crowds, right? So maybe you're not looking for that experience. You want a quieter experience. How do you make sure that you have a quieter experience? So that's what we're going to get to. And so these 2 pictures here is a picture on the left that's up at Hermit Lake during spring skiing. And I used to work for the AMC, and my office window overlooked the Tuckerman Ravine trailhead. And I would say there were days, easily days in April, where we would have somewhere between 1,500 to 2,000 people hiking that trail. I've heard people tell me, I don't know this for a fact, but I've heard people say that there have been upwards of 3,000 people in the bowl before, which is an incredible amount of people there. On the lower right picture, this one down here, this is what I would consider kind of like the classic photograph of Mount Washington, people waiting in line to stand on a summit. So, you know, how do you avoid these crowds? And, you know, I should say that the White Mountains are a particularly busy place, and annually, on average, the White Mountains get about 6 million visitors, between 6 and 7 million visitors a year. And to put that into perspective, that's more, if it was a national park, would be the second busiest national park behind Great Smoky Mountain National Park. The White Mountains National Forest gets more visitors than Yellowstone, than Yosemite, than Grand Teton, than Olympic, than Zion, than Rocky Mountain National Park. In fact, some years, it will receive more visitors than Yellowstone and Yosemite combined. And if you've ever been to Yosemite, if you've ever been to Yellowstone, those are busy places. They're packed with people. So it kind of gives you an idea of, I would say, the heroic duty that the National Forest and the state park have in order to mitigate impact. They do a fantastic job of that. And it really is a large number of people to handle. I have heard that it is one of the busiest national forests in the country. The White River National Forest in Colorado receives more visitors, upwards of like 8 million a year, and that's mostly due to the ski resorts that are based there. All right, so how do you avoid some of these people, right? Well, kind of the first thought a lot of people have is they're going to escape to a wilderness area, right? So that's the best way to not see somebody, to kind of be able to get on a 4,000 footer and have it to yourself, is to escape to one of our fabulous 6 wilderness areas. And so you might be thinking of the Pemigewasset Wilderness, right? And so there's a picture, is Bond Cliff in the foreground there, 4,265 feet. And then you can see that the slides on West Bond in the background there. And the thing about our wilderness areas, that's often a lot of people's go-to when they think about how to escape some of the crowds. And so the thing that I'm not showing you in this picture is I'm not showing you the 12 kids I was leading, who I was like, get out of this picture. I need my picture. I need my wilderness shot. Get out of the picture. And then you're not seeing like the 15 other summer camp groups that we like raced to the top and raced back down, so we could get to the summit for a little bit. So, you know, the wilderness areas, they can be a little crowded. And I know certainly there's a lot of organizations that are working on how to mitigate some of that impact and disperse some of that. Because certainly if you've ever been to Geo on a busy night, you've seen people camping up and down the trail. The overflow camping sites are taken, all the kind of impact sites are taken. So it's certainly an issue that to be dealt with. So wilderness areas, that might be one way, right? Another thing, winter hiking. So think a little bit about hiking during the winter. We'll certainly drop some of those numbers. So this is a photograph from a hike I took just, maybe 2 months ago, a month and a half ago, not that long ago, sometime in February or March. And this is from Mount Pierce, the side of Mount Pierce. And I broke trail for most of the day, and breaking trail with new snow certainly limits the amount of people you're gonna see. But eventually, so here's a picture on the left, that's from when I was breaking trail going up. And then I went back about a week or two later, and you can see right here, there's just like a sidewalk from all the hikers that have come up and down. It's just, you know, no need for snowshoes, micro spikes are just fine. So you can see that even winter hiking, it may not necessarily give you that solace you're looking for. Other options that you might talk about are hiking a more challenging route to the summit. So if you're gonna go up Washington, go up Huntington Ravine. So here's a picture of actually my wife and I, this is so great. So my wife and I took the day off from work, and I was like, I'll do whatever you wanna do. This was last fall. Whatever you wanna do, whatever you wanna do, it's up to you. She looked at me and she said, I wanna go hike Huntington Ravine. And I was like, this is great. You're so great. You're so, oh, I love you. Let's go do that. And it was a beautiful day, and we hardly saw anybody. Midweek, hiking up Huntington Ravine. All right. Oh, another, if you're looking for a way not to see somebody, sticking with those harder routes, is trying, and I would say trying, attempting, and there are some very experienced hikers on this Zoom, so maybe some people have done this. I attempted this in mid-April, which is a horrible time of the year to try and do this, but I attempted to summit Carter Dome via the Ramparts, which was not a great idea. I did it with a couple friends. You can see them right there in the blue. And I didn't make it all that far. I thought I could get to the summit that way, but it just April conditions were not the best time of year to try and do that. Other options, and I would not recommend people to hike in poor weather, right? You know, making sure you're staying within your comfort zone, but you know, hiking in poor weather, being outside when it's raining, that's going to certainly drop the number of people out there that you'll see. So there's a picture of That is, I believe that's either Bigelow Lawn or Monroe Flat. I think that's Bigelow Lawn right there. So hiking, and it's just raining, foggy and rainy all day. And we went up and hardly saw anybody. Another option would be hiking during shoulder season. So this is one of my traditions. I don't know when it just started, but it's a tradition that I have now is right before Thanksgiving, I like to hike up the Tuckerman Ravine Trail and just try and see how far I can get up before the, either I get have to turn around, either due to bad weather or turn around because just poor trail conditions. But I really love hiking that time of year because typically it's already winter, a little higher up above 4,000 feet. And I love this right here is probably my favorite mountain feature in the White Mountains. This is Boot Spur right there. And I just love, look at that feature right there. That is a big mountain feature. Someone who grew up on Western mountains and big jagged mountains, I love that feature right there. That is one of my favorite spots in the entire Whites. That's also one of the most busiest spots in the Whites. So maybe I shouldn't be the guy talking about finding solace in the White Mountains. All right. So this is kind of my newest thing. So kind of my newer thing is you can just hike at weird times. So this is me. It's a picture looking down my driveway as I'm walking out to do a hike. And you can see the moon is rising over South Doublehead. And I won't tell you what time it is, but it is not a normal hiking hour. And I can tell you I did not see a single person on that hike. Not a one. All right. So wilderness areas, winter, challenging routes, poor weather, shoulder seasons, very early or very late. Typically, if you want to try and cut the number of people you're going to see, you're going to have to factor in one or two of those things. Again, I'm not encouraging people to hike in bad weather. I'm not encouraging people to go beyond their comfort area and challenging themselves. But, you try one or two of these things together, you're going to see a few less people. All right, two obvious things that we haven't discussed yet. Before I do that, I should just point out, this is also one of my favorite views. This is from the ledge on Doublehead. And you can see Mount Washington there. And there's Carter Notch on the right, Gunsight Gap, as I've heard people refer to it, and that's a great place to see why they would call it Gunsight Gap. So one of those obvious ones would be just bushwhacking, right? You want to see less people? Stay off the trails. And I put this map here. This is my plug for Tin Mountain. I put this map, field station here because every May, well, not this May, but normally every May, I lead a course at Freiburg Academy on outdoor leadership. And as part of that, we do 3 days of learning navigational skills with a map and compass and a full day of bushwhacking. And often we practice those skills first at Tin Mountain properties. And so we alternate between the field station in Jackson and the Nature Center in Albany. And they're great places. So if you are interested in learning to bushwhacking and off-trail travel, I think these are great places. Mostly because anytime you want to take someone that's beginning to learn, it's great to go somewhere that has some fun features that you can find on a map and that it's hard to get lost, right? So you see you're kind of encircled by trails. So, you can pick a spot and, aim for Grand Junction, and no matter what, you're going to hit a trail. And it's make sure kind of ensuring that you're not going to get lost in the first 1 or 2 times you go out there. So bushwhacking would be one option. And then the other one, it would be just stay below 4,000 feet, right? There's the other one. We're not going to talk about these two things because we're looking at less traveled paths, right? Up 4,000 footers. So we are
alerted Jim Worcester.
And we are going to stay on the trail. This picture, by the way, is from another one of my favorite spots in the White Mountains. This was actually back when the world was normal and we had our trivia nights at Tuckerman Brewing. This picture was a trivia question to see if people could figure out where this picture was taken from. And this picture is taken from Mount Tremont. That's Sawyer Pond right there. Mount Tremont, it's lower than 4,000 feet, but it's a wonderful hike. It's great from the Kank. It's great from 302. It's a good mountain to go explore. All right, so we're going to jump into those 4 options outside of our traditional approach. So starting one with Carter Dome. All right, beautiful, beautiful Carter Dome. Carter Dome, which the first ascent was unknown. It's thought to be named for Dr. Ezra Carter, who was a physician who was active in the 19th century, who spent a lot of time exploring the whites, primarily looking for medicinal herbs. And in 1876, the AMC adopted the name. So originally, almost the entire Carter-Moriah Ridge was referred to as Carter Mountain. And then in 76, the AMC adopted the name Carter Dome, which now as I'm looking, this is also the year that they were formed. So that was item number one. They're like, let's start a club and let's change the name of that mountain, Carter Dome. So the standard approach. The standard route up Carter Dome for most people is to take 19-mile Brook Trail to either the Carter Dome Trail or the Carter-Moriah Trail. It's about 10 miles, 3,500 feet of elevation gain, which you can see right there. 19-mile Brook Trail, which I believe is named, that what I have heard is that it was named 19-mile Brook because it was approximately 19 from the train station in Glen. That's the story I've heard. I'm not sure if that's accurate or not, but that's the one that's always been told me. And that spot right there, the reason I have this picture here, this is kind of a boring picture of a trail intersection, but the reason I have this picture right here is because I have had about 150 lunches with school groups at that is the halfway point to the hut. And I have lunched there many a time. And it's a fabulous spot for lunch. So what that looks like, what you're looking at is you can see so Route 16 is right here. Here's the 19-mile trail, comes in, and then groups either come up here to Carter Notch and then come up to Carter Dome that way, or they'll go via the Carter Dome Trail up to Zeta or Zeta Pass, depending on how you pronounce it, who you are. I've heard people say both, and come up this way. So that is one option, is the standard route. But I would say maybe rather than going that way, what if you went that way? All right. So instead of starting on Route 16, is starting way back here on Carter Notch Road from Jackson and taking the Bog Brook Trail up to what is possibly one of my favorite trails. I was very torn about whether or not I should tell people my favorite trails, but I think I feel good about it now that I'm doing it. The Rainbow Trail, which goes up Rainbow Ridge to Carter Dome, and you come back down through Carter Notch and back on the Wildcat River Trail. So Bog Brook to Wild River to the Rainbow Trail, it's a little bit longer. So you're going to 12 miles and 3,200 feet of elevation gain. But you have some great payoffs. So neither of these are my pictures. And I really wish, the one on the left here is a photograph from Rainbow Ridge. And I wish that the person had just turned just a little bit on that camera, because the view of Washington from Rainbow Ridge is awesome. You kind of crest up to the ridge and it just opens up right in front of you, and it's really beautiful. And on the way up, you have these great birch glades that you walk through that just scream Succession. You know, if you wanted to take a picture of Succession in action, it would look like that on the right. And then, so you head up to Cone, and on your way back down, you can visit Carter Notch Hut, which is the oldest hut that is still standing in the AMC system. The Madison Spring Hut was built in 1888, but it was rebuilt several times, and most recently, just a few years ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago now. So you can see, you know, a nice, beautiful stone hut there. I will say a hut that has maybe the sweatiest walls of any place I've ever been in my life. If I give you any piece of advice, that is, if you ever stay at Carter Notch Hut in the winter, never wear a puffy jacket. Never wear a puffy jacket in that hut. The walls are so thick with condensation. That's actually how we used to break in new staff. We'd say, see whether or not they lean back against that wall. All right, and then you also have Carter Lakes. Beautiful Carter Lakes, which I've also heard are stocked by Fish and Game. I've heard that Fish and Game flies up there and stocks those lakes. And then, oh, of course, so this is a picture not from Carter Dome, but if you're up there and you're thinking, well, I'm going to go a different way anyway, I would highly suggest you go check out Mount Height. And Mount Height, so you come up that Rainbow Ridge and then follow the green line up there to Mount Height. Mount Height is a beautiful view, perhaps the finest view within that Carter-Moriah range. A really pretty view, and then you could keep circling back on. And that would add on, I'd say probably a mile round trip onto your hike. Carter and Height, so they believe that Carter was named for Dr. Ezra Carter. Mount Height, I've heard two different stories. One is that there was a gentleman named Height from Lancaster who was a companion of Dr. Carter's. And the other story I've heard is that Carter and Height were trappers from Jackson who built a trail coming back up from Jackson, and it was named after them as well. All right, that's one option right there. Let's go to the second option here. All right, option number 2, halfway there. Mount Jefferson. All right, beautiful Mount Jefferson, 5,716 feet tall. First ascent was August 1820, named for our third president, Thomas Jefferson. And it was named, so July 31st, 1820, there was a group of men from Lancaster, New Hampshire, who were guided by Ethan Allen Crawford. And during that July 31st, 1820 date, they ended up naming quite a few of the presidentials. So that was when that peak was named, along with Mount Adams and a whole host of other ones as well. All right. So the standard route is the Capps Ridge Trail, 5 miles round trip, 2,700 feet. And I just have to point out here, you're gonna notice there's a beautiful girl in a pink jacket, and that is my daughter just crushing the Capps Ridge Trail last fall. It was like October, I think this is like mid-October. And, you know, we got to the top and I was like, well, what did you think? How was it? And she was like, I just wished it was longer and steeper. So, you know, as a 8-year-old, she really made it happen. It was awesome. And a super fun hike for her. You can see, just really enjoyed some of these ledges over there. But that's the standard route, and it was a great route for her to go up. And so that's starting down here at Jefferson Notch, which I could be wrong about this, but I believe Jefferson Notch that trailhead is the highest elevated public road in New Hampshire. It's just a little over 3,000 feet, so 3,009 feet. So you get a pretty big advantage. So you're already starting at 3,000 feet on your way up to Mount Jefferson. And it's a super fun trail. It's great. But, so that's one option, right? So that's kind of the standard route. If maybe perhaps you want to see a few less people, I would suggest via Castle Ravine. The first time I did this, I probably spent like a week just gushing to people about how much I loved Castle Ravine. This was a great trail. So this is considerably harder, right? So 5 miles, 2,700 feet for the Capps Ridge. This is 10 miles and 4,200 feet. And you can see this is actually looking into Castle Ravine right here. And that's the castellated ridge right there, the castles. I'll talk about in a few minutes here. But you start down here off Route 2 in Bowman, and you'll head up the Castle Trail, over to the Castle Ravine Trail, up the head wall to Jefferson Ravine, and then back down via the Castle Trail. And I love this trail. So this is what the head wall, coming up the head wall of Castle Ravine looks like. It's steep. It's pretty wild. I did this hike I've done it a couple times. I think I've done it 3 times now. And I don't have to even think about it. I'll go on a beautiful day. The last time I did it was a beautiful day, mid-July, something like that. And I didn't see a single person until I got below the summit cone of Jefferson and then started to hear people. Not a whole lot of people go back in there. And I'm not sure why, because it's absolutely beautiful. That's looking back down. That's not my picture. That's looking back down from the head wall into Castle Ravine. So I know this is about going to the top of 4,000 footers, but if I were to tell you like kind of the perfect, so I'm going to lower my voice because now it's just between you and me, right? So if you want to know kind of like the perfect experience on this hike is you would do this. All right, get ready for this. You do that. And all you're doing, so you can see it turn to green, so all right, yellow to green. And all you're doing is you would just bushwhack across the summit cone of Mount Jefferson, head back down. And I've done this twice, and I've done this on a beautiful summer day, on a weekend day, and not seen a single person. And all I did was just stay 100 feet below the summit cone of Jefferson. You could hear people. I could hear people right above me, but I didn't see a single person. And then, see, look at that. So you get up there, and right? Do you need to get on top of Jefferson if you see this? This is beautiful. So here's getting on top of the ridge right there, and you got Adams and Madison right there, and it's just a lovely, lovely spot. Really pretty. And then you get to go back down the castellated ridge, which is a really cool, it's a very not very narrow, but it's a relatively narrow ridge. It's very rocky. It has the castles on them, where these kind of rocky promontories that stick out along the ridge. It's most noticeable if you're driving on Route 2 from Jefferson, towards Randolph. You really notice the castles up there, and it's a fun hike up or down. And just recently, as I was putting this together, I discovered that this hike is on a list called the Terrifying 25, which are 25 hikes that are supposed to be the scariest hikes in the White Mountains. So there you go. This one's on there. I assume Huntington Ravine would be on there too, but I don't know. All right. Option number 3. How am I doing on time? Oh, I'm doing great on time. Okay. Option number 3 is Mount Eisenhower. Lovely Mount Eisenhower. First ascent is thought to be by Darby Field in 1642. Its original name was Mount Pleasant, and that's by that same Weeks Bracket Party. And I love that it's called Mount Pleasant because they just ran out of presidents. In 1820, they named all the presidents that had been, and then they got to Eisenhower, and they're like, I guess we're out of presidents. This one's called Mount Pleasant. It was renamed Mount Eisenhower in 1972. That's probably 3 years or so after Eisenhower. All right, passed away. Okay, so standard approach. There's my daughter again. She crushed that trail too. So the standard route is either via the Edmonds Path at about 6.5 miles, or via the Crawford Path, which is a little bit longer. And you could also go over Mount Pierce if you wanted to that way as well. Both great hikes. The Edmonds Path, this is not my picture, but I chose it because the guy hiking up, he looks so like he's just not enjoying himself, which is funny because I find the Edmonds Path very enjoyable. Edmonds was a trail builder in the late 19th century. And his belief, so there were a couple different schools of thought. Warren Hart on one side, who was like, every trail needs to be super challenging and hard, and he built the Six Husbands Trail of Jefferson. But Edmonds, on the other hand, thought trails should be graded and smooth. And so when you hike the Edmonds Path, it's really nice. I mean, it's very well graded. It's a lovely trail to hike on. The Gulf Side is another one of his that's really great. So that's kind of one of the standard approach. So, and that's what it looks like. You can either come in from up here on the Edmonds, or come in on the Crawford Path that way from 302. So rather than that, and I should mention, so this one and the one, my options 3 and 4, I've done as overnight backpacks. I've also done as single day hikes. So you can do them as either, depending on, how you feel and how much time you want to spend out there. I think that looking back at it, I enjoyed them more as backpacks, but they're great single day hikes as well. So rather than going that way, oh wait, sorry, hold on, I forgot. Getting ahead of myself. The third way you can get to Mount Eisenhower is just down from the summit, which is 4 miles, and it's only 500 feet of elevation gain one way. And it had not even occurred to me that until I started spending more time in the presidential range, that's how a lot of people reach those mountains, is driving up and then hiking down, which sounds a lot smarter than hiking up. So you can see there's a picture looking down. There's Lakes of the Clouds right there. Mount Monroe, Roche Montagne, right? So it's a sheep back right there, formed by the Continental Ice Sheet, and looking down the southern presidential ridge. Okay, so now I'm back to where I'm talking. So that's one way to approach. So instead of that, what about trying that? All right, so rather than coming up the Crawford Path, is taking a look at coming up the Dry River, which is really a great hike. And this puts you on 2 great trails that are, in my opinion, underutilized. One would be the Mount Eisenhower Trail, which is right there. And the other one would be the Mount Clinton Trail, which is that one right there. And those are 2 fantastic hiking trails that you will not see a ton of people on. So you're looking at the Dry River Trail to the Eisenhower Trail, the Crawford Path. You guys can do that, blah, blah, blah. It's a much bigger day, right? So looking at almost 16 miles, close to 4,000 feet of elevation gain. You get to go over this great suspension bridge right there at the beginning of your hike. It's pretty. As you keep moving, you've got Dry River Falls right there. You can try and time it. See, Mount Eisenhower is great for some of that Lapland Rose Bay and Diapensia. And then on your way back, you can see the newest hut, which is Mizpah. which now looks different because this photo was taken before they had that big blowdown there. And oh, here's a great, so this is a great shot. This is the Mount Clinton Trail. So clearly a well-defined trail. The 2 times I've hiked it, one time I followed the trail the whole way, and the second time I lost it completely for long stretches, and so I just walked down this drainage. And it was like, I think this drainage will take me there. We're gonna get there the same, but this trail cuts back and forth across this drainage a whole bunch of times, and is part of this drainage a whole bunch of times. So it's a little more challenging, but I did not see a single person. That is a true fact. And you know, what's the great thing about this, I'm gonna go back here, about this hike here is you get up here, and so you get a taste of being in a wilderness area. You get up here, there's some great boil sections up here. Oh, you get to go to Red Pond. I didn't even talk about Red Pond. So Red Pond, which is right there. I don't know this, I've never seen this. I've never seen this occur, but I have been told that Red Pond, which sits right here during heavy rainstorms, will actually dump out into 2 different watersheds at the same time. So what'll happen is when it rains really hard, they'll have on one side of the pond, water's coming down into the dry river and then into the Saco. And then on the other side, it's going into the Ammonooke. So I think that's kind of cool to think that, you know, one pond sitting up there, it's possible that when it rains really hard, you know, half that water is making its way to Long Island Sound, and the other half is making its way to Biddeford, Maine. All right. Okay. Option 4. Here's our final one. Option 4. Mount Moriah. I love Mount Moriah. My sister-in-law, my wife's sister, and her fiance just recently came up and they hiked Mount Moriah, and I just said that was a great choice. Mount Moriah is a great mountain. First ascent is unknown. Its name first appeared in Philip Kerrigan's 1816 map. Kerrigan, who was also a member of that week's bracket party. And Mount Moriah, the standard route would be the Carter-Moriah Trail, which Carter-Moriah Trail has been around for a long time. I didn't put a year on that, but I know that there have been, that traditionally that there was a bridle path that led from Gorham up there. There was even a shelter up there at one point on top of the summit. But it's about 9 miles and 3,400 feet of elevation gain. Or I'd say my second choice to what I'm about to show you is the Stony Brook Trail, which I like a whole lot, which is a little bit farther, but a little less elevation gain. So that's kind of the standard route. That looks like that. So that's coming up the Carter-Moriah Trail that way. I forgot to highlight it. Stony Brook would come up that way and then get on the AT that way. So rather than hiking that way, I would, and really this is a good one. This is a really good one. This is, I wouldn't say this is my favorite hike in the Whites, but we're getting down to it. Like, this is getting close. This is a great hike. And this is coming from the side of the Wild River. And there's so much to like about doing this hike from this side. It's a big day, right? It's a big day. There's no doubt it's a big day. But you get everything from Moriah Gorge, the views of Mount Moriah, to Shelburne Moriah Mountain, which is a really underrated little mountain, a great little spot to be. And you're not gonna see a whole lot of people on these trails at all. One of the reasons is because the Mount Moriah Trail looks like that a lot of the time. There's a lot of blowdowns. It's typically very, very muddy. That picture I showed you at the very beginning of the woman's shoes that was on the Mount Moriah Trail. So it's a really muddy section. It's about 15 miles and 3,600 feet of elevation gain. But it's great. It is fantastic. You get to see Moriah Gorge, which is a beautiful spot. One of the reasons why not many people hike this trail is that there used to be these beautiful suspension bridges that are no longer there. So now to get across from one side, so if you're down here at the Wild River Campground where you park, and you need to get across the Wild River, there used to be a suspension bridge right here. And there's also the Spider Bridge, which is farther down this way. And now both of those bridges are gone, which requires fording the river. This is not my photograph. This is just a picture of someone I found on the internet. And I would say that would be fairly low water for the Wild River. I have done it twice, where I've had to ford at those 2 spots. And both times the water was pretty high and pretty fast. And there's a reason I don't have any pictures. Because I was a little nervous about across without getting knocked down. It was definitely, you know, those times where you're like, oh yeah, you're supposed to unbuckle your pack while I cross this stream. And I was like, oh yeah, I'm definitely doing that. I'm unbuckling my pack because I don't want to get knocked down. All right, and then you also have the Shelburne Moriah Mountain there. So right, you've got these great river crossings, and then you get up on top of Shelburne Moriah. There was fires up there about 100 years ago, and you've got these beautiful views, beautiful clearings looking into the Shelburne Valley. Really a great spot. There's another picture. This is from a different training that I led, and the weather looks appropriate. I'm sure I was happy with how that looked on that one. All right. So, all right. If we had more time, I would love to tell you. I'd love to tell you about some of these other hikes. We talk about Desolation at Kerrigan. Desolation Trail is great, right? So you come up, like, you could even come from 302, go up Nancy, Norcross Pond, drop back down, go up Desolation. Oh, it's awesome. Or through Kerrigan Notch, both great hikes. Six Husbands to Mount Jefferson, also great. We talked about Warren Hart earlier. That is a great trail. That's probably on that terrifying 25 as well. Skookum to Lafayette. So that trail, we were talking about, like, oh no, there's all those cars in Franconia Notch, and you know, there's 1 million people up there. I've hiked that trail in the height of summer when there's 1,000 cars in Franconia Notch, and I've pulled into that trailhead and there's been like another car there, you know, like 2 other cars there. It's just an underutilized trail. Kate Sleeper to try Pyramids is another good one, although really you should stick with the North Slide Trail. That one's more fun. And then this picture right here would be Pine Lake to Mount Madison, or coming up Madison Gulf. So if we had more time, we'd look at all those. I wish we did. I could talk about this all night. That would be great. All right. So final, down to the end here, final 2 slides. One is just a reminder for the summer: keep it local, keep it tame. In fact, I think that, I believe just this week, the White Mountain National Forest has opened up the east side of Mount Washington. And I believe that the AMC 4,000 Footer Club is now again accepting, like, you can now apply for a patch skin. They put a hold on it for 3 months. We're not recognizing any hikes that you did in between then. But I still think that, you know, the best practice is stay within your comfort zone. All right. And finally, these are just the thoughts of one person. And I'm going to stop sharing that screen here in a second and see if you have any questions, concerns, things going on. We can talk about that. So I got to figure out how to stop sharing. I think I did it. Did I do that, Nora? Yeah? Okay. All right. So.
Yes, I'm back online.
We're back.
All right. Yes. Well, so yeah.
All
so
right.
thank you
We're welcome
for that.
Oh, good.
Oh no, I was just gonna say. So thank you for that pictorial journey throughout some of the 4,000 footers of the White. As I said before, I don't think the chat feature has been utilized during this. If someone has a question and they're uncomfortable unmuting themselves or unable to, you can type it directly in there. Otherwise, you know, if you have questions about any of the hikes or other hikes, we do have, I know, a couple of redliners who are on this, who are watching as well, who may be able to jump in.
Yeah, I basically defer all questions to Larry
need
Garland, probably. I think he's on this.
Yeah.
So.
yes, we have Larry and Dave on this. But if folks,
Dave or Fran?
so if anyone has any questions or comments, yeah, if you want to go ahead and unmute yourself, we can do that now.
And it's okay if you don't.
So yes, thank you. So we have Peter Crane put in the chats. Yeah, so if anyone is looking for a great resource and where a lot of this comes from, the the AMC White Mountain Guide, Steve Smith's book about the 4,000 footers. Both of those are great, great resources if people are looking for those. And I believe our local bookstore, White Birch, would have those in stock.
I saw someone just mentioned 52 at the View. That's a great list. Those are great hikes. They're a little bit off the beaten path. That's a good list of hikes. Which actually 52 at the View is just updated. They just took 4 or 5 mountains off and put 3 or 4 more on. So it's a great list.
Yes, and I am also I am putting Mike's email address mduflo@tinmountain.org into that chat field, because if anyone does have questions about anything he said, particularly those interested in, because there's a question about hiking with children, he would be a great resource. We've got, we have soon to be 5, 7, and 9-year-olds. So
do we have kids? I couldn't tell. Are there kids? Do we have kids in our house?
We had to hear the drum beat.
All right.
But yes, so another great idea coming through here, something that we have talked about once we were a little bit comfortable being together in person, are potentially bushwhacking workshops. We've done them for students, but we have done ones for the general public, but we haven't done them for probably 5 or 7 years. So another great option. But again, I don't know if anyone has any questions for Mike or for any of the hikers on here. Otherwise, his information is on there. You can also reach out to anyone at Tin Mountain. But I am actually going to, Mike, let you. I've got to mute this.
You're great. All right. Hey, thank you so much, everybody, for showing up. Tin Mountain really appreciates your support, especially during this time. So thank you so much. And I hope that everyone out there stays safe. I hope you stay healthy, and that I hope that everyone you love are doing well. So thank you guys again for coming.
Thank you, Mike. That was great.
I have one comment. This is Tony. I have a comment. I just thought I'd say, when I was doing the redlining, that I did one 12-night backpack all around the White Mountains, and to do the redlining, and I planned it so I did not go over any 4,000 footers.
That's pretty good.
That is good.
That's nothing but rocks.
Oh.
Yes, and I think that, as one of the things, Tony, what you just said, and, what Mike mentioned, is that one of the great ways to see fewer people is to stay below 4,000 feet, because, those that are checking, those that are, crossing off names on lists are usually avoiding those lower mountains. And there are a lot of hidden gems in the Mount Washington Valley and the Whites.
Thank you, Mike. That was a very enjoyable presentation.
No problem. Have a good night, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, yes, and I think otherwise our next, as I said, we've got no program following Thursday, but on June 25th, we have Dana Fox, who will be presenting on loons of New Hampshire. So that should be a great and timely program. But yes, otherwise, thank you all for tuning in for another week of Tin Mountain's remote programming. Be safe, be well, and we hope to see you soon.